Coming up today, the World Health Organization declares the Zika virus outbreak and the microcephaly situation a public health emergency of international concern. The Korean government convenes its own crisis evaluation meeting. Korea will have a new Liberal Party in the coming hours as Ahn Cheol-soo's People's Party will hold its official inauguration ceremony. It comes as the two main parties remain in parliamentary deadlock over some pending economy-related bills. Plus, Korea's consumer price growth slumps back into the 0% range in January as low oil prices continue to bite. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 2nd of February. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Brew. We are going to start at the nation's top office, where President Park Geun-hye has once again urged the passage of a series of pending bills to complete her reform drive, nurture new growth engines and revive the flagging economy. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-sun is on the line for us. So, Ji-sun, anything notable about the president's remarks this morning?
Mark, at the fifth cabinet meeting of this year, President Park highlighted the importance of each bill pending at the National Assembly, underscoring their role in boosting the economy and improving people's livelihoods. Her statements were more comprehensive and down to the point, and her emphasis was on deregulation. She said in this fast-developing era, excessive regulations stand as obstacles to new growth engines, and it's important to act quickly. She reiterated her call for reforms in the four sectors of labor, education, finance, and the public arena. She also made note of Seoul's strategy of growth and reform. She pointed to the fact it has been rated as the second best among G20 members, but said the reason it missed the top spot was because several of the related bills are still stuck in Parliament. The president also pointed to a recent security scare at Incheon International Airport over the weekend in which a fake bomb was found, and called for full readiness in the medical, emergency, and security sectors ahead of the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday. Seollal is one of Korea's biggest holidays, and it's one of the times of the year when Koreans travel back to their hometowns en masse to see their families. It starts this weekend and runs into next week. Back to you.
Thank you, Ji-sun, for that report. Now staying with domestic politics, and the new People's Party is holding its inauguration ceremony this Tuesday afternoon, signalling its official launch. At the event, the party will make a formal announcement about its leadership, including tycoon-turned-politician Ahn Cheol-soo and independent lawmaker Chun Jong-bae, who will serve as co-chairs of this new party. The two will also lead the party's election committee for the upcoming general election in mid-April, along with Representative Kim Han-gil. Now, Ahn started the new party after leaving the main opposition Minju Party in mid-December. The launch comes amid the ongoing impasse in the National Assembly over several pending bills, and that looks likely to continue. A meeting between the two main rival parties and the Assembly Speaker to try and resolve the situation that was scheduled for Monday has been postponed indefinitely. Now, acting strongly and swiftly, the World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus a global public health emergency. At present, the WHO says the most important protective measures are the control of mosquitoes and the prevention of mosquito bites, especially in pregnant women. Kim Mok-yeon has the details.
The World Health Organization has declared the mosquito-borne Zika virus a public health emergency of international concern. The announcement came after an emergency meeting in Geneva on Monday, made up of 12 health experts from the United States, Europe, and Asia.
I am now declaring that the recent cluster of microcephaly and other neurological abnormalities reported in Latin America, following a similar cluster of French Polynesia in 2014, constitutes a public health emergency of international concern.
WHO officials say the emergency has been called over the cluster of serious brain defects in unborn babies thought to be caused by the virus. Brazil's health minister says local researchers think Zika is the cause of the roughly 3,700 confirmed and suspected microcephaly cases in Brazil, but the link has not yet been scientifically proven. He added that the virus cannot be transmitted from person to person, but only through mosquitoes. Since there is no known vaccine or cure yet, authorities say the only way to avoid contamination is to avoid getting bitten by the Aedes mosquitoes that transmit the infection. With the WHO predicting up to 4 million infections by the end of the year, traveling and trading activities to infected countries could be restricted, but that hasn't happened yet. With the 2016 Rio Olympics just 6 months away, panic is spreading, particularly among female athletes, spectators, and journalists. The Brazilian government has advised pregnant women to stay away from Rio until the outbreak is brought under control. The Russian and Australian teams have also told female athletes to consider carefully if they want to take part in the Games. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Now, the Zika virus is raising alarm here in Asia as well, with cases having been confirmed in Indonesia. We are going to connect with our Han Dan at Arirang's news center to hear about how the Korean government is handling this situation. Dan.
Good afternoon, Mark. The Korean Health Ministry's Centers for Disease Control and Prevention convened a special meeting this morning to assess the level of the threat posed by the Zika virus here in the nation and to begin developing preventive measures. The participants included Health Minister Chung Jin-yup, top officials from the Korean CDC, as well as a group of medical experts, including Professor Song Young-gu of Yonsei University. As you know, Mark, the MERS outbreak rattled Korea last summer, and it exposed some of the CDC's weaknesses. So officials really seem determined to swiftly come up with effective measures to prevent the Zika virus from entering the country.
And so, Dan, what were the experts' perspectives on the possibility of this Zika virus actually entering Korea?
Mark, there's some relief on the horizon. Officials and medical experts say the possibility of the Zika virus spreading in Korea looks highly unlikely as long as citizens follow the government's prevention advice and avoid visiting countries with confirmed cases. Officials also advised people returning home from those countries to inform the quarantine department and visit their nearest medical clinic for a test. And Mark, they also added that the current cold spell in Korea will help prevent the virus from entering the country, as the Zika virus is mostly transmitted by mosquito. Back to you.
Yes, Dan, thank you very much for that report. Now, we're going to move on to some economic news. Korea's consumer price growth sank back into the 0% range last month. Statistics Korea says prices edged up a mere 0.8% in January from the same month last year. And that's a slowdown, actually, from the 1% range growth recorded in the final 2 months of 2015. Apart from those months, though, prices have been rooted below 1% since December 2014. The sluggish growth is largely linked to plunging oil prices that also drove down prices of petroleum products by over 10% from a year ago. However, there is a stark contrast with goods that aren't really heavily hit by the oil price factor. Agricultural product prices rose 2.4%, while housing rental costs rose nearly 3%. Korea is moving to expand its financial ties with Iran following a landmark nuclear accord that lifted sanctions on the oil-rich country. For starters, Seoul and Tehran have agreed to keep a long-standing payment system that's been used since sanctions were imposed and possibly expand it down the road. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Korea and Iran will hold on to their Korean won-based payment system. The agreement was reached at a meeting in Tehran over the weekend between a Korean delegation of officials from the finance and foreign ministries, as well as local lenders, and officials from Iran's central bank. In order to facilitate trade between the two countries, Iran has maintained a Korean won account. It's been in place since 2010 when Korea joined the international community sanctions on Iran and dollar settlements became impossible. So how does it work? If a Korean refiner needs to pay for oil imports, it sends the money to Iran's central bank in Korean won, and the bank exchanges it for Iranian currency. Similarly, Korean companies get payments in the Korean won. The account currently in place at Uri Bank in the Industrial Bank of Korea is estimated to be worth over 3 trillion won, or roughly $2.5 billion. The two sides are also mulling the possibility of expanding the system to include other currencies like the euro. However, as such process requires the utilization of the dollar as a medium currency, the move would need U.S. approval, as Washington doesn't allow the dollar to be used to settle accounts with Iran. As for earlier reports indicating that Iran might be planning to withdraw its money from the account, Korean officials say the amount requested by the Iranian side is not large enough to be of concern, adding they plan to continue their negotiations on adding other currencies to the payment system down the line. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea has jumped 2 notches to 27th on this year's Index of Economic Freedom. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
The U.S.-based Heritage Foundation, in partnership with the Wall Street Journal, has announced the results of its annual Index of Economic Freedom. Hong Kong topped this year's list, followed by Singapore and New Zealand. South Korea ranked 27th, making it the 7th highest Asian country on the list. South Korea scored well in terms of regulatory efficiency, particularly business and monetary freedom, but got relatively low marks on labor freedom and freedom from corruption. On the overall list, the United States was 11th, Japan 22nd, and China 144th. North Korea remained rooted to the bottom. The index measures the economic freedom of 186 countries based on a variety of subcategories, including trade freedom, business freedom, investment freedom, and property rights. 8 countries, including Syria and Somalia, were not graded due to their overall failure in state affairs. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, sales of diesel cars in Korea rose by nearly 9% in 2015 amid falling oil prices and the rising popularity of both domestic and overseas brands. According to industry data, the number of diesel cars in Korea surpassed 8.62 million last year. That's up nearly 700,000 or 8.6% from the previous year. The market share of diesel vehicles has been on an upward trend in recent years. The figure for gasoline-powered vehicles gained nearly 3% over the cited period. The number of LPG-powered vehicles stood at 2.3 million, down over 3% from the previous year. In 2015, the number of registered vehicles in Korea surpassed 20 million. That's up 4.3% from the previous year. Now, it has emerged that 2 Chinese military planes briefly infiltrated Korea and Japan's air defense identification zones last weekend. Seoul and Tokyo believe the aircraft were trying to collect intelligence on the area. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Korea's defense ministry says a Chinese reconnaissance aircraft and an early warning and control aircraft passed over South Korea's submerged rock of Yeodo off the southern coast of the Korean peninsula on Sunday morning. The planes then flew toward Korea and Japan's air defense identification zones near Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo. Korea's defense ministry said on Tuesday that even though the flights did not directly violate the joint air defense identification zones, it's customary to get prior approval from the country of jurisdiction. The Chinese planes, however, provide no notification to Korea or Japan. The Korean Air Force warned the planes to change course without sending up jets of its own. The Japanese went one step further, scrambling fighter jets to the area. Officials say the Chinese planes promptly signaled that they had no hostile intentions and changed course back to China. Korea and Japan believe the planes were attempting to collect intelligence data. Security experts believe Beijing wants to increase its maritime presence around the South China Seas and even further afield, and have warned Seoul to remain on guard for any more breaches. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now it's crunch time in the race to be the next president of the United States. From now until July, every state and overseas territory will hold votes in so-called caucuses to decide who should be the Republican and Democrat candidates for the 2017 election. First up is Iowa, the Midwestern state which often sets the tone for the entire campaign. On the Republican side, it is a close race between Donald Trump and Texas Senator Ted Cruz, with Florida Senator Marco Rubio trailing a bit behind. Votes are being counted as we speak. The race between the Democratic candidates Hillary Clinton and her main rival, her pretty much only rival, in fact, Bernie Sanders, is even closer. The full results are expected shortly. The United Nations is struggling to get Syrian peace talks on track, let alone off the ground in Geneva. Representatives from the Syrian government and opposition representatives are in the Swiss city, but have not yet begun even indirect negotiations. On top of that, talks that had been scheduled for Monday between the UN envoy and the Syrian government delegation were postponed as well. Officials say the talks couldn't go ahead as the opposition insists on an end to airstrikes and siege conditions in rebel-held areas before it even thinks about coming to the table, and that is something that hasn't happened yet. Delivering a statement on the negotiations, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said the United States called upon all the parties gathered in Geneva not to miss the chance this moment presents. Well, that's all we have for now on this Tuesday at lunchtime here in Seoul. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to our newscast. We greatly appreciate it. We'll be back throughout the day with more news bulletins. Until then, goodbye.